The Russian propagandist has been on and off, saying that, look, this is going to unite the country, get people mobilized, and get people volunteering to go to fight in Ukraine. It's not really happening. You see, especially people outside of Moscow, seeing the messages that basically those drones tried to bomb the residences of Russia's most rich and powerful, saying, well, that's kind of what they deserve.
Now, did senior politicians and civil servants in the UK get a bit of a chill when former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said they were a legitimate target? He is now deputy of Russia's Security Council and said that British military support for Ukraine constituted an undeclared war against Russia. Anton Barbashin is the editorial director at Riddle Russia. Joins us this morning to shed some light on what we know about what is going on. Good morning to you, Anton.
Good morning.
What did you think when you heard what Dmitry Medvedev had to say about the UK?
Look, Dmitry Medvedev has been at it for quite some time, pretty much since the war began. I mean, I wouldn't take his word seriously. He has been saying that Ukraine doesn't exist, Poland should be annihilated, and quite some many other things, which are very unflattering to a former Russia president. But that's his shtick, pretty much. That's what he does since the war began. So I wouldn't really read into it. He's not kind of a messenger. He's just setting a tone, which is nuts, but it is what it is for the time being in Russia.
Do you think there's a difference between, if we look at the UK and how they're conducting themselves, is there a difference between saying that you will support Ukraine and having photo ops between Rishi Sunak and President Zelensky, and James Cleverly brandishing, well, not brandishing, but holding a weapon in his hand? Do you think they're both the same thing, or is one perhaps a safer thing to do than the other?
Look, at this point, whatever you do, however you want to frame it, the Russian officials or media officials would interpret the way they needed to interpret it. I mean, as long as Western countries are supplying arms to Ukraine, that's going to be the story of the day. So it doesn't really matter all that much for Russia. But I think it's crucial to send a proper message to Ukrainians, to the rest of Europe, that UK stands for supporting Ukraine, is going to be supplying arms, so on and so forth. I mean, it is still being read in the Kremlin seriously as a gesture of support, and that the support is going to last. But I mean, whether you want to hug or present an arm, it's part of style, but not really a part of messaging all that much.
Do we know what the current situation is in Russia with any opposition or any, not just from civilians? I know that these are quite small scale and they are pretty much stamped on very quickly, but also politically as well, amongst all the, I don't know, the generals, etc. Is everything smooth there?
I mean, look, if we're talking about opposition in a civic sense, the opposition is either in jail, exiled, or kind of more or less hiding. You have a certain degree of kind of Russian direct action against the military infrastructure. You have some of the fires set on the recruitment offices, rail being bombed. But when it goes to the regime itself, whether it's political or civic component, we don't actually know. I mean, none of that is actually seen. We can only suspect there's a great degree of dissatisfaction with the way the war is going, and you have a sentiment coming from the Russian elites in general. I mean, that the war itself was a mistake, but losing the war is much more worse than that. But we don't actually see any of that really public. There are certain fragments of near official kind of actors like Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Wagner, who has been criticizing the Ministry of Defense quite heavily and very publicly. But this is sort of the exception. I mean, the Russian system does not really like when anything is being said of criticism quite openly. So it's not really a style of the system. But we could safely assure that there's a lot of dissatisfaction with how the war is going, and generally the state of affairs that Putin got the country in.
The latest drone strike on Moscow, what do you think happened there? Who do you think was behind it?
Well, I think it's quite clear. I mean, this is as many other similar attempts. It was not the first one being done by Ukraine. Whether it's the military intelligence or some other agency, doesn't really matter. It does show that Ukraine has the capacity. It does show that Russia is not as impenetrable as Russian officials would claim it to be. But if the expectation was, I mean, the Russian propagandist has been on and off, saying that, look, this is going to unite the country, get people mobilized, and get people volunteering to go fight in Ukraine. It's not really happening. You see, especially people outside of Moscow, seeing the messages that basically those drones tried to bomb the residences of Russia's most rich and powerful, saying, well, that's kind of what they deserve, which again speaks to the fact that what we have is a significant portion of Russian society does not view this war as their own, but as something that the government does, Putin does, and do not feel kind of united in this moment because they don't see Russia being attacked and thus they don't want to get involved.
Right.
Which is a major problem for the Kremlin that is trying to rally the support, trying to get more people to volunteer to go fight in Ukraine. So they would not have to do another round of mobilization, which is really hurtful for government's position ahead of the next year's presidential elections.
Yes, Anton, thank you very much. That's Anton Barbashin, who is the editorial director at Riddle Russia.